everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to do something that I've actually never done before. So in the past, I have reviewed games that were more focused on story than they were on gameplay, for such examples like Last Rose on PS2, then there's D on Sega Saturn. But this game right here is Metal Slader Glory, and it happens to be a pure adventure game through and through, although I guess in today's standards it would be called a visual novel. So I've never reviewed something that was to this extent, but I figured I'd try something different, and also this was a game I always wanted to try out for myself, and that it recently got fan translated. So it was developed and published by HAL Laboratory in the year 1991 on the Famicom. And this game actually had a pretty interesting release history. So the leader of the project was Yoshimuro Hoshi, who used to be a manga artist, and after working on some cover arts for certain games, and supposedly one day Satoru Iwata actually saw some of the drawings that he used to work on and he was really impressed by it, and therefore he wanted him to work on a brand new game. And the game actually started to be developed in 1987, so it took quite a long time for this game to get released because this game was a really huge project, so huge that when the game was released, the cartridges for this game were much bigger in size compared to other Famicom carts, for that they had to make special boards which were much more expensive to make because this game really did push the limits of the Famicom. And in case you're wondering what the exact file size for the ROM is that it's actually 1,537 kilobytes, which is pretty damn huge for a Famicom game. And hilariously enough, the only other NES game that I've seen that actually has a bigger file size is Action 52. Considering how ugly that piece of shit of a game is, it really makes me wonder how it actually took up more space. Well, anyways, that's just something that amused me, so now, let's talk about the game. So the story takes place in 2062, and the main character you play as is Tadashi, and he's a 17-year-old orphan who happened to live with his sister named Azusa. And one day, Tadashi and his friend Elena happen to buy a second-hand mech that is used for construction, a work mech as you might call it. So after getting in there, it turns out that the work mech that they bought was actually using a cloaking device to make it look like a work mech, but in reality, it's actually one used for battle and military. But if that's not shocking enough, there happens to be a message displayed inside the mech saying, "Earth in danger, seek the creator." So this all seems very suspicious, so Tadashi and his sister and his friend Elena are trying to figure out who created this mech and also who piloted it before. And because this is the future, of course, they travel to different colonies where there is many different towns and such, and trying to solve the mysteries of this mech. And that's how the journey begins. Now, there's like a ton of other stuff I can get into here, but the thing is, this is a visual novel that recently got fan translated, so yeah, I'm not going to give away any spoilers here. But one little interesting Easter egg that I do want to showcase here is that, remember what I said about that the creator of this game happened to be a manga artist before? Well, the manga that he worked on before was called Akutenso Phylexia. Probably not pronounced correctly, but here's the picture of it in case you were curious about it. And of course, there are three characters in this manga called Shin, Luna, and Ai. And all three of those characters actually appear in Metal Slader Glory. And in both projects, they both happen to be mechanics, so that's actually pretty cool that he kind of connected the two together. So now, let's get moving on and start talking about the gameplay. So, you read, and you read, and you read. I mean, what else more do you want? Well, every so often, you'll always get a choice of different dialogues of things to say. And I have to mention that a lot of the things that Tadashi says in this game is actually pretty damn funny. Just as an example, if you have an option to look and you're facing like a female character, he'll act like a snarky womanizer, and it's pretty amusing some of the times. Especially when Elena tries getting him focused on the main task at hand. So yeah, you get a lot of different choices you get to pick, obviously. And there is one part of the game later on where you gotta look for something, and it kinda plays like a point and click, where you gotta move your hand on the screen, you gotta point at where you need Elena to look into. And I really don't think I need to explain in depth about the controls because, I mean, like, this is the most, like, simplistic shit ever. I'm sure anyone that has ever held an NES controller can play this game. So now, let's get moving on and talk about the game's graphics, and I have to say, the graphics for Famicom standards are fucking amazing. Not even joking when I say this, but this might be one of the nicest looking Famicom games I've ever played. I'd even say that it's even nicer looking than Moon Crystal, and that was a damn good looking game that was also a very late release. So not only do I love the character art for the game, but also I just really love like pretty much all like the designs and the aesthetics. In fact, there's actually one character in the game that kind of looks like Maytay from Galaxy Express 999, so I thought that was really cool. And it also has a lot of nice bright colors and a lot of gray. But I think they used the gray tones in a perfect way. They didn't make it look like some like boring fucking diarrhea looking shit. But probably the showstopper here would have to be the animation. Man, it's phenomenal. Like, I can't believe that this is actually on the Famicom. Like, this could have been on, like, a Japanese PC or something. And like I said, with the game being on a bigger cartridge, well, now you know why. Because this game just looks fucking gorgeous, and it just really pushed the limits of the Famicom. Now, as for the game's music, the music is pretty good. It has a few songs that I do like within the game, and there's a couple of them that are kinda catchy. But there is a ton of songs within the game, which is probably another reason why this game took up a lot of space, and also the fact that this game also has sort of voices in it. Basically, whenever the text is going by when someone is talking, you'll actually hear a sound effect coming out of their mouth as if they're actually talking. Best way I can compare this to is kind of like Banjo-Kazooie. I think it's a pretty interesting effect, although I can kind of see where some people would get annoyed of that sound effect, but it never annoyed me personally though, but I thought it was an interesting touch. But overall, I'd say that the sound quality is really good for what it is, and also the music is a pretty solid OST. Now, if you wanted to go out and buy this game, if you wanted to own the original cart, well, first of all, it's going to be in Japanese, so if you speak English, then you pretty much have no way to play this game unless you can read Japanese. But I'd figure I'd look up some prices out of curiosity, because this game only had one print run when it originally came out, and since because the game was specially made and therefore made it very expensive to produce, they couldn't do a lot of print runs. So knowing all this, how expensive is this game? Well, according to the Canadian dollar rate of a complete in-box used copy, it's going for $367. To be honest, I was expecting this to be in like the $500 or $600 range. But regardless, I can't imagine anyone I know that would pay that much for a visual novel that's only in Japanese, but, you know, I'm sure someone in Japan would probably go nuts over it. Now, as for my overall thoughts on Metal Slader Glory, is that for a visual novel released in 1991, it is actually a pretty good game, and I also did really like the story and all the character dialogue. I thought it was actually really fun stuff. Now, for those that are like really hardcore into visual novel games, one thing I will say is that there's not a lot of endings to the game. There's only like one main ending, and all the rest of the endings are kind of like bad endings where either you die or someone else dies. So it's pretty basic for a choose-your-own-adventure sort of game, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you gotta remember, this is before like shit like Danganronpa and Zero Escape, where that was just like crazy shit to the max. But for the time it came out though, I actually did like it, but as much as I did like the story and the different characters and the character dialogues, unfortunately it seems like there's a lot of characters that don't really have like a whole lot of depth to them, and apparently the reason why that is because this game was originally going to be a lot bigger, but they had to scrap out a lot of different ideas due to the limitations of the Famicom. In 9 years after the release of this game, they did make a remake called Metal Slader Glory Director's Cut on the Super Famicom in the year 2000. Yeah, this is actually one of the last Super Nintendo games that came out officially. And to make it even stranger, they actually released it only on the Nintendo Power cartridge, which, by the way, no, I'm not talking about the Nintendo Power magazine. It was a flash RAM cartridge which you can actually download games from. So as you would expect for a director's cut, it actually does retain some of the cut content that was from the Famicom release. But unfortunately, as of right now, it has yet to be fan translated, but I'm pretty sure we'll get one eventually. Because that's something else I have to mention, is that the translation team, Stardust Crusaders, did a really good job on this game. So yes, even though this version that I played is not considered like the full version of the game, I still liked it for what it was, and would I recommend it to other people? Well, recommending games that are like this is just as difficult as trying to review them due to the fact that they're not for everyone. But if you don't mind these sort of games, and you do like science fiction and mecha stuff, I think you would enjoy this one. Okay, well one thing I will explain, and don't worry, I can explain it in a way where it won't spoil anything, but later on in the game, there's actually one part that does kind of remind me a little bit of the movie They Live with Roddy Piper, so I thought that was actually pretty cool. So that's the only, like, crazy thing I will mention later on, but anyways though, I really did like this game, and I wouldn't mind replaying the director's cut later on whenever it does get fan-translated. So that'll be the end of this review, so thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a good day.